about my relationship to John Belushi. Did I mess up the computer? I'm sorry. Okay, that's a good idea. So my talk is called Out from Under an Influence, John, You Ignorant Slut. There's a before and after to my discussion of John Belushi's influence. Before. In 1977, I'm 10 years old and I stay up late some Saturdays to watch Saturday Night Live, a program then in its relative infancy, featuring its not-ready-for-primetime players who are, especially compared to today's high-sheen celebrities, an endearingly scruffy troupe. Neither New York nor that show will ever again in my lifetime be as raw and rough-hewn as they are today. 70s-era SNL is sophisticated in downtown in a way I grasp completely and perhaps also not at all. I've developed an infatuation with John Belushi, one of its stars. The tween industrial complex is not yet fully in gear, but the demographic to which I belong has already been marketed to heavily for decades. And I say that authoritatively, but I don't really know if it's true, at least for years. The sanctioned crushes of my generation, Sean Cassidy, Parker Stevens, David Cassidy, and God forbid, Donny Osmond, hold absolutely no allure. In the case of Sean and Parker, fuck that blonde noise. Belushi, on the other hand, is completely lacking in sweetness and sparkle, or more accurately, his sparkle is of another order. Endogenous rather than exogenous, it's the charm of the charm school dropout. Partly it may be his peculiar opacity that appeals to me. Along with being funny, he's unaccountable, strangely inscrutable, remote. All the other players have a vulnerability about them, not as far as I can remember Belushi. And if he ever broke character while performing, I don't recall that either. What about that would appeal? I can't say. Maybe the especially porous like myself always want to penetrate the seemingly impenetrable, and softies are always attracted to hard exteriors. The proto-erotic attachment of a child, especially to adults, is something none of us want to dwell on, nor probably should we. What the hell is a crush? It is longing, desire, attraction. Whatever conventional standards of male beauty his person may have violated, I was certainly drawn to his body, as is only right, because John Belushi was essentially corporeal. Indeed, more perhaps than for most, his body and spirit were inseparable. And what a spirit that seemed to be, even or especially when sending up and making light of passion and commitment, as with Bluto's rousing speech in Animal House, his own passion and commitment are palpable. But back to the flesh, a rubbery intensity, a dive across a news desk or onto a stage, a full-bodied assault on the stuffy and the staid. It would be mistaken to call a 33-year-old's demise timely, but can you imagine Belushi's curvilinear comedy in the digital era? Can you imagine him tweeting? I don't like the thought. He is a launching out of the physical form without apology, not a pithy utterance pared down by an app. Often playing the unrefined misfit, a Kurosawa-esque tailor whose crafting of bespoke suits with a samurai sword threatens to castrate his customers, for example, or Brando's godfather in touchy-feely group therapy. Characters, in other words, passionately committed to their own values, but to reality, comfortably numb. When he played the pinnacle of Western culture, Beethoven, it was to reveal the great composer as an early Ray Charles. Such status-deflating reversals are a comedy constant, and who better than the roly-poly to turn the highbrow on its head? and you have to forgive me for the next line of this. Remembering his signature facial gesture, the eyebrow against the highbrow, we might say. That was unforgivable. Thank you for laughing. I'm one laugher. But again, what does a child's crush on an adult amount to? To what was I responding and why? 20-something years later, I began more consciously to grasp what drew me Belushi-ward. When an exercise in a creativity self-help classic invited me to list the people I most admired, ascetic French thinker Simone Weil and Dostoevsky, chronicler of tortured souls, topped a list that included not one funny person. But when the next question asked, whom do you really, as in secretly, admire, Belushi was suddenly at number one. From a philosopher mystic who during World War II considered self-starvation the only moral choice, to Mr. Out-of-control overindulgence himself, what a chasm separated the two. To bridge them required a leap as it turned out, from my own intense gravity into the lightest, most playful parts of myself. My surprising to me high valuation of Belushi taught me to stop rejecting lively aspects of myself I'd labeled obnoxious. Eventually I came to realize that silliness was my core value, even. And it actually is to this day. Anyway, acknowledging my admiration for the seemingly uncontainable Belushi led me to begin to stop judging and start expressing the less contained parts of myself. Yes, Belushi was a juvenile crush and adult inspiration, but never had I delved into his bio beyond the basics. Chicago-born, hyper-ambitious, fatally addicted, Second City-trained, music-loving son of Albanian immigrants. Never had I done so before Monday of this week, that is, when, in preparation for this presentation, I found myself visiting his Wikipedia entry where an accusation by his fellow not ready for prime timer, Jane Curtin, confronted me. In an era of continuing casual sexism, Belushi's stood out. Rather than a merely dismissive stance toward his female co-stars and the female writers on the show, he was an actively oppositional force. Because, in his opinion, women could not be funny, he considered it his duty to sabotage them. Beginning with this one troubling and deeply disappointing revelation, more began to emerge. Based on Bob Woodward's controversial Belushi bio, Wired, words like sociopath are thrown around in connection with the comedian. At the same time, Dan Aykroyd, defending his best friend from Woodward's worst accusations, showed up on a Google search, as did Bill Murray, championing his former castmate. I seem to have a Samurai Taylor Rashomon situation on my hands, with many perspectives delivering varying Belushis. Nothing, however, contradicted Jane's account, to which my first response was disgust, disappointment, and for a brief time, full-on depression. Discouragingly, Belushi would have acted as a gatekeeper, barring me and my kind from the precincts of comedy. Given this ugliness and his self-destructive behavior, he was fired and rehired numerous times. One guesses he was tormented by demons worthy of a Dostoevsky character. Do confused, untenable ideas draw you to drugs, or do drugs draw you to confused, untenable ideas? I'd say both. Also, a contributor to one culture, he was a product in part of a different culture, so rife with misogyny that there is an Albanian tradition of some women becoming sworn virgins who maintain celibacy and dress as men just to avoid the harsh limitations and restrictions placed on their gender. The more I continued watching videos of his performances in preparation for this evening, the more I realized that silliness will out. an improvised, angry expression of my feeling of betrayal at an open mic, actually on Monday night, helped shift my mood and throw off the cloud of his belittlement as well. I will not let my teacher of unrestriction and uncontainment restrict and contain me. So what if he has turned out to be a reluctant or rejecting muse, whose enticements were accidental and whose assurance was unintended? What he created had unplanned power to set me free to be myself. Carefully choreographed and spasmodic, the genie of his genius cannot be rebottled and stoppered. When I traveled in Syria in 2002, I remember feeling pity for men who sat in cafes and bars where no women were present. How very much were they impoverishing not only the experience of the women who were tacitly unwelcome in these public spaces, but their own experience as well. Despite his feelings about it, Belushi is lucky he lived in an era that forced him to move, however ungraciously, beyond his own limiting preferences. We do not choose our infatuations. Were I to return to 1977 with this new knowledge, I could not shift my allegiance to Chevy Chase or Aykroyd if I wanted to, and I do not want to. However John Belushi might feel about it, I am grateful for what his mysterious magnetism roused in me. One way Aykroyd has sought to rehumanize the tarnished Belushi image is by emphasizing how literary he was. With that unexpected information in mind, I'd like to share a poem. And this is a very obscure work, very obscure. Broadly Speaking by John Belushi. Some broad who fancies herself funny, planting old shoes on well-trafficked graves and acting all Mississippi John Hurt, as if Chicago were a stampede of elements and Albania a point of entry. Bristle as much as you want. I wouldn't waste my time on you. Are we going to fuck? I didn't think so. Get out of here! Get out of here! Out! Now let me just make sure I have time. Oh, okay, I think. I'm going to quickly, we'll call this bad performance art instead of comedy. That way, if I don't get laughs, I won't have the aforementioned shame spiral. I can really relate to some of the people you were laughing in your poetry. Thanks to both of the readers who went before me, and artists, I should say. That was really wonderful. So let me think. Okay. It's ridiculous. So just remember, bad performance art, that's what we're going for here. Emerald tablet, under the influence. What kind of sick, twisted individual drives the speed limit? I get behind these people and I think, we're the same species? That's disturbing. I mean, what kind of home creates that kind of individual? You know it's the mother's fault. And then we were supposed to create, especially for this presentation, and I was inspired in part by what I learned on Monday about Belushi to try out an experiment that I'll just share about with you for a moment. A friend of mine told me last week that she's been herself, I think inspired by YouTube video, she has made a point when she's walking down the street of not getting out of the center of the sidewalk when a man is coming towards her. And in fact, she also makes a point of looking the man in the eye and then looking down and then looking at him in the eyes again, just to express that she is not submissive. just to make that clear. And I love that idea, and I wanted to try it out, but then I thought, you know what, I can take that a step further, and I have. So what I've been doing since Monday, just, you know, to get my power back, is that I've made that point of looking at men in that way, but then I also grab their crotch, which I find is very effective, actually. But he best not say hello to me at that point or compliment my boots, because that would be catcalling, and that's not cool. Thank you very much.